Good morning, everyone. Sorry I didn't get to my second video yesterday. Sometimes videos I'm working on don't come together in time, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, so I have to scrub it, and that's what happened last night. So sorry about that. But here we are to today, and today, well, I was thinking to myself this morning, I wanted to show a picture of Mr. Subedar with Justin Trudeau, and because on the 9th, the picture on the left with Andrew Scheer was taken with Mr. Subedar. And it's very interesting because Mr. Subedar writes sermons instructing men on how to beat their wives. And that's widely reported by the rebel media, but it's really interesting. And Sabby1957 is tweeting, quote, "Hey Canada, please remember who is pandering for votes and who they are pandering to. Not to even mention the carbon taxes or the corporate welfare. Vote PPC. Be the change. I'm all in. Are you?" Yeah, here's the whole image. Link is in the description if you want to check it out. But isn't it interesting, right? And speaking of tying people to unpopular other people, here's Justin Trudeau tweeting, quote, "My thanks to President Emmanuel Macron for today's call, or for the call today. We had a good conversation on how Canada and France can work together to fight hatred and extremism, and also talked about the jobs and opportunities that CETA is creating in both our countries." And I just want to remind you that Emmanuel Macron is really, really disliked in France right now, and they're entering like 20 weeks of yellow vest protests, with each week escalating further and further, and our media continually ignores them and that. So it's interesting that our prime minister is trying to tie himself with Mr. Macron and claiming that they're fighting hatred and extremism when I don't see that happening at all. I see Mr. Trudeau aligning himself with Islamic extremists and pointing at white supremacy as something that everybody should be fearful of, except modern history is full of the first thing and not really full of the second thing, really. I haven't seen a whole lot of the white supremacy people attacking anybody. I've seen a lot of lefties trying to shut free speech down, but I haven't seen white supremacists getting any traction at all. Even a popular politician, if he was gaining, popularity and everybody really liked him, and then he said, "Yeah, and white people are the most intelligent and the best race ever." If they said that, done. Absolutely done. No one would follow them anymore. They would lose popularity like that. That is not something that is okay in Canada. And that's very clear. But the fact that they're pointing out that the alt-right is dangerous and they're trying to tie Andrew Scheer and Doug Ford to the alt-right in campaign speeches, this is crazy. This is really crazy. Here's the CBC reporting, quote, "Trudeau road tests campaign attacks that lump Scheer and Doug Ford with the alt-right." Ooh. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau road tested his campaign strategy Friday, lumping Conservative leader Andrew Scheer with Ontario Premier Doug Ford and other right-of-centre politicians who deny climate change, vilify immigrants, and tolerate white nationalists. In a 25-minute speech to supporters in the Toronto suburb of Mississauga that mentioned Ford as much as it did Scheer, Trudeau criticized the recently released Ontario budget and warned how it could be reflected on the federal stage. Ford, quote, announced his first budget loaded with cuts. Cuts to services for farmers, cuts to services for Franco-Ontarians, for seniors, for post-secondary students, for Indigenous peoples, for children, and for all those who rely on community social services. Shame, Trudeau said. Andrew Scheer takes his cues from the Ontario Premier, so Canadians can expect much of the same if he ever gets elected. Cuts to the Canada Child Benefit, cuts to the National Housing Strategy, cuts to the OAS, and to the CPP enhancements on climate change in particular, and he's no better. Ford's budget did make a number of cuts to programs and services, but they were less than we were expecting, and the provincial government is still running a deficit of almost 12 billion. Right, so it's almost like Trudeau is not telling the truth. Right, because a lot of people who voted for Mr. Ford were actually disappointed at the high spending of this budget. So if anything, Mr. Trudeau's criticism is falling on deaf ears, people who want more cuts and more restraint on spending rather than what we've seen. And that's not the right thing. Here's MP Bill Blair saying, "I'm not sure what, quote, 'I'm white, you're white' is all about in this since deleted tweets sent to me, but I condemn racist white supremacy among anyone in Canada." And the tweet is really awkward to read. I'm not even sure why he's pointing it out other than to virtue signal about white people and white supremacy and whatever. But it's really this pivot to seeing white supremacists everywhere is really weird. It seems like somebody trying to turn the page on SNC and just, whoa, oh yeah, there's a fire. Let's stoke the fire with a lot of gasoline. Okay, moving on to some Ontario stories today. Ontario could eliminate daylight savings time if private members' bill passes. I hope it does pass. I think daylight savings time is a waste of time, really. I don't like it. I never have. But I think it would be really interesting if we did end up abolishing it, if this was the last year we did daylight savings time, because then it would be one of those footnotes in history, like, oh yeah, we used to do that. Why'd we do that again? We turned our clocks back every year? What kind of crazy people were we? It's those kind of little notes of history that get lost, right? Like, why would people do that? Why would you do that? Why was that a thing? So I think it's kind of funny. I hope we fix it. Here's Legal Aid Ontario getting hit with a $133 million budget cut. The PCs say the organization can no longer use provincial funds for refugee and immigration cases. I also saw a tweet by Bill Morneau talking about this, trying to vilify Doug Ford, and I'm actually going to go get it because it's funny. So here's Bill Morneau's tweet, and he says, quote, "Last month, Ontario's Conservative government asked us to increase funding to legal aid in the province because they know that legal aid helps protect Ontario's most vulnerable. Yesterday, they chose to cut legal aid funding by 30% anyway." Okay, now I'm going to put this tweet into perspective. Last month, Ontario Conservatives knew that they were going to cut any ability to use Ontario public money to help immigrants or refugees. That's 30% of their business, as we'll see in the next article, because I've just got one more thing to show you here with regards to that. So they knew last month that 30% of the business was going to get cut because they were going to come up with this law. The law that prevents public Ontario tax dollars being used to help non-citizens stay in the country. Non-citizens that you, Mr. Morneau, and your ill-advised Liberal government let in through an open border in Quebec, right? Roxham Road, and other various avenues of which people have exploited Canada's very leaky, very open system since you guys took charge, you and Mr. Ahmed Hassan. So that's why the Ontario government told you that they were going to need increased funding, because you opened the border and you think that it costs nothing. You think that everybody can just spend our tax dollars on non-citizens and that's fine. And it's not fine. And the Ontario government told you what their move was going to be. And instead of responding to it to fix it, you ignored it for political gain. This is on you, sir, not on them. And good on them for telling you what they were going to do. I'm flabbergasted that you're trying to make political hay out of this, because it's a lie. Here's the article. CBC News reporting, quote, "Legal aid funding cut nearly 30% in Ontario budget." Right. Legal Aid Ontario got hit with a major cut in Thursday's budget as the provincial government pulled $133 million and said the organization could no longer use provincial funds for refugee and immigration cases. The organization's CEO, David Field, said the cut is a significant blow. It's a 29% reduction in the amount that they're going to be providing to us, and you're right, that's the largest component of our budget, he said Thursday evening. Me for a second, at least they had another 70% of their budget to work with, right? At least they're diversified. At least it's not 50 or 70% of their budget. Okay, back to the article. In budget documents, the government said it expects to save $164 million by streamlining the delivery of legal aid by the 2021 fiscal year. The government insists that the organization reforms, it can actually help to move more people with less funding. Field said they are going to have to take a hard look at the finances, consider ways to streamline and offer more services online. Quote, "We have to look at the entire organization and how we can adapt to the new fiscal reality that we're facing," he said. The province sets the income threshold for when a person is eligible for legal aid and it increased that figure this month to make people with slightly higher incomes eligible. Now a single person making less than $17,731 per year qualifies, up from $16,728. That's good. So you can make more money and still qualify. Good job. The provincial government has recently called on the federal government to cover the full cost, arguing they should provide Legal Aid Ontario $45 million to cover the costs. Quote, "Ontario has called on the federal government to fully fund immigration and refugee legal aid services for cases proceeding before the federal tribunals and the federal courts," he said in an email to CBC News. Field said that the changes coming at a bad time. Quote, "We've seen marked increase over the last 3 or 4 years, in the number of refugee claims that we've been having to deal with. So having the province now say that only federal government is going to provide those services does represent a challenge for us," he said. I wonder why, this is me now, I wonder why there's been an increase in the last 3 or 4 years, eh? I wonder why they've seen that number jump. And no matching funding from the federal government, who are the ones who created this problem. No communication from the federal government. We were just let to continue to pay for this growing and increasing chunk of people. Great job, federal liberals. Wonderful. Not only are you divisive, you are absolutely financially incapable. Back to the article. Ripples through the justice system. Dana Fisher, a legal aid lawyer herself and a spokesperson for the union representing 350 Legal Aid Ontario lawyers, said it's hard to see how cutting a third of the organization's budget can be accomplished through streamlining. Ha, yes. A cut of that nature is going to be a horrific at any point in time, but the nature of its starting immediately is just going to cause ripples throughout the justice system, she said. You're looking at an immediate impact to defending people's rights to liberty, to access to justice, to people being able to fight for custody to their children and access to their children, including women who are fleeing domestic violence. Fisher said the refugee law funding cut will put lives at risk. Quote, from the immigration perspective, these are the individuals who are facing extradition and torture and persecution, and these are our real lives that are going to suffer as a result of these cuts, she said. Ah, yes, so scare and shame you. Scare and shame you. So here is the final one. Ontario gas stations could be fined $10,000 a day for missing anti-carbon tax stickers. And I thought the CBC, I'm not going to read the whole article, I just thought the fact that the CBC wouldn't show the whole sticker was funny. Like, what are you doing, CBC? Why can't you show the whole sticker? So here's the whole sticker if you're not in Ontario. And I think it's pretty funny because this mimics the carbon tax is helping look on the federal messaging, packaging and stuff. It's kind of a take on it. So I should find it and show it to you. Hold on. All right. I can't find it right now. And I've got other things to do this morning. So I'm not going to go looking any more than I already have. So I just think it's interesting, right? It's funny that the controversy over showing you where your tax dollars are going and how they're going up and how upset people are getting about this whole thing is interesting to watch. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca.